Hey there, and welcome to Bo&Joe. I'm Bo.
I'm Joe.
And today we're alternating who's asking the questions. Before, last episode was me talking about Agartha. In this episode, we're going to let Joe hit me with something. And it promises to be good, as he's very tight-lipped about it and said there's going to be some translation that needs to happen. So I'm intrigued. What do you got for me?
Right, so I'm going to first say it in Spanish. It's called Sociedad de la Niebla, which translates roughly into Society of the Mist. So we've never really talked about secret societies on the podcast before.
Right.
So I wanted to make it special. There's very little information on this one, especially in English. There's almost nothing to be found.
Okay.
What's interesting about this society, there's so much to unravel on it, but I first wanted to talk about the origins of it. So in Venice in 1499, there was a book called The Dreams of Polyphilus.
Sure.
Or Sueño de Polifilo in Spanish. In this book, in and of itself, seems, for the most part, to
innocuous.
be just a
romance.
A romance.
It was written in 1499, I believe.
Right. And it's just a romance novel, but once you start delving deeper into it, there's a lot of occultism, symbology. There's multiple languages. There's even hieroglyphs. But what's interesting about the hieroglyphs is that they're made up. They're gibberish.
In the story?
Yeah.
Okay,
so what's interesting also is that there's many people that are attributed to have written it, but there's no real known author for it. So they even pointed to the Medici family at some point that supposedly they wrote it, or a guy called Francisco Colonna, a lot of people. But
right. I think if you look it up on Wikipedia, he's credited for the creation.
But that's not 100% right. And again, that's why it's a very interesting subject.
So before we get too deep into it, what is the story about?
Remember we were talking about Jules Verne on the last podcast?
Right.
And I mentioned
Journey to the Center of the Earth, yeah.
So I started delving
deeper.
Great
book, by the way.
Yeah.
And actually, the original movie, better than all the new ones.
Oh my god, yes, dude. I love that movie.
Yeah, it's terrific.
Even if the graphics are crazy, but...
it's bad. The giant lizard is actually just a regular lizard. But
it's cool.
But if you can look past that, dude, that's one of my favorite all-time movies from back then.
I agree, man. When I saw that when I was a kid, I was like, I fell in love with that stuff.
Same. I love the concept, and I would totally do something like that myself, I think.
Yeah.
By the way, I was thinking, based on our last conversation, is off topic, maybe we should go to Antarctica.
Yes, we have a friend who did.
Do we?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
For the military. He's not allowed to talk about it.
Oh, shit.
So, now that you've blown his cover.
But,
All right, so back on subject, though.
He worked on No Such Agency, too?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Yep.
All right, so back to subject.
Tell me about the book. So it's about what?
Okay, so the book's a very simple romantic novel, but not really. So, again, the reason I delved into this and found this information was looking into Jules Verne. So Jules Verne was part of the society.
The Society of Fog?
Yes,
or
Society of the Mist. It's loosely translated. You can either be Society of the Fog or Society of the Mist, but again, there's very little information on this topic in English.
Okay.
Almost everything that I found was either in French, Latin, or Spanish. Most of it was in Spanish. Again, so the idea of this book is, from the surface, it just looks like a simple story. A story about this man, Polyphilus, who fell in love with Polia, and just a story about his dreams. But the real interesting part of all this is all the occult symbols, all the mysterious things that are mentioned. You can things from alchemy to... there's too much to talk about. But again, love story of Polyphilus and Polia. So the Society of the Mist supposedly came into being in the 16th century by a man called Sebastian Grippo. Probably
Sebastian Ripple.
Ripple, yeah, I'm butchering the name.
Okay. Right.
But the society, one of the major dogmas, I guess it were, of their Bible is this book. So one of their major,
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to make sure that I understand, and for our listeners as well. You're saying that you found this in the... I'm going to generalize, and I apologize for listeners if you're offended. But this is in the Hispanic realm that you found this.
Well, not honestly. The first time I read it was in French. I can't read French, but I used Google Translate.
Okay.
And translation from French to Spanish is pretty good. It's a Romance language.
So how did you... what brought you to this? This seems like an unusual topic.
You know Alexander Dumas? The guy who wrote...
Not personally.
So he's the man who wrote The Three Musketeers, the guy who wrote, what's the name of this? Count of Monte Cristo.
Okay.
So guess what? Not only was he a member, he was the one who indoctrinated Jules Verne into the Society of the Mist. So that's where I started delving into this rabbit hole. Again, if our listeners look at this, please look for it in Spanish. So, La Sociedad de la Niebla. It's important, because if you look for it in English, there's almost nothing. And you'll see later why this is so interesting. So, there's a book by a guy called Michael Larry, talks about the secret messages of Jules Verne and his dealings with such secret societies as the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, the Illuminati, blah, 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 blah. And, the more notorious and well-known secret societies.
Sure.
What a lot of people don't know, though, is that this specific society was not only tied to all of these other secret societies, like the Priority of Zion, the Illuminati, and all these others, but they were held in the epitome of this situation where all these secret societies were in play, because we know that the Illuminati died out. There's a lot of superstition on that, specifically now with the internet and everybody that mentions it. But realistically, what actually happened, and this was in Bavaria, right? And in the same amount of time where this was going on, this society was actually more powerful and had more influence than any other secret society.
The Society of Mist?
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm having a lot of trouble believing this for a group that I've never heard of.
But think about it. That's the part that got me the most. If there was such a group, would you really know about it?
Yes. And I'll tell you why. Because the same reason that, and I'm not saying, I don't want to offhandedly dismiss your section here.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to hear where this goes. But I'm also one of those people that says, when I hear people say that someday the president, when he is going to come out about aliens and when this is going to happen, and I don't believe any of that's ever going to happen, because I think if there's such... Realistically, if there really is a massive network of shit happening illegally, or illegally is a broad term when you're the president or a government that doesn't care about the law, then it's really hard to keep a lid on those things. Somebody's going to tell somebody, let it slip in the night or something. So it's really, really hard. That's why I know that, like, you think like Skull and Bones, you think Thule Society, for example, you think... the Freemasons, the Age of, there's a bunch of different societies like that. We all found out about them because somebody couldn't keep their mouth shut. So for one group to be listed that powerful, I find it difficult to believe.
I understand, but let's delve in deeper, right? I mean, it's a very curious subject.
We've got time to kill, so let's hear it.
All right. So, apart from the things that make this curious to me is just how powerful this society was. So let's back down to some things that people know about. So the Freemasons, particularly the Illuminati. Right. At that time, the Illuminati had one goal, and this comes back to the main goal. One was to understand that book about Polyphilus, right?
Okay.
Which I'm butchering his name, but we'll go back to that. And the other goal of this society was tied to one of the main goals of the Illuminati of that time, which was, and this gets weird, but they wanted to unify the entirety of Europe, or that world, under one person, one government, basically, a new world order. That was the original, goal of the Illuminati.
Right.
So that's why they were trying to influence and integrate with so many different governments and start up revolutions. That's why you see the French Revolution had such a hand from people that were members of the Illuminati, not just the Illuminati, but also of the Freemasons and all these other, like the Priority of Zion. So each one of these societies had a mingling or intermixing of members of this secret society, the Society of the Mist. And what supposedly happened is, if you think of like a company, right? You have the umbrella corporation, and then you have the subsidiaries. This would have been the umbrella corporation. That's what makes it so creepy and weird. So they had a hand in pretty much all of the revolutions that were going on in that time. They were trying to make this thing, the New World Order, as it were, become to fruition.
And where did you find this data?
So again, a lot of this comes from that book that I just mentioned.
I forget the name of it.
Yeah, it's a Michael, butchering his name, Michael The Secret Messages of Jules Verne. and his dealing with all these
the secret messages of Jules Verne.
Yeah. So there's, I mean, even in the newest books, they talk about how some people believe that what he was talking about was real. And we can get into that a little bit later, because there's a lot of stuff that was mentioned in his books. That, you remember last podcast, we were talking about some of the works of fiction that have, if you read between the lines, messages.
Right.
Like we mentioned the Illuminated Path, right? So, I don't know if...
Lamy?
Lamy? Lamy?
Lamy?
Yeah.
Michael, you're right, I'm probably butchering it, but...
It's a weird name.
for the listeners, it's Michael Lamy. For this conversation, let's call it Lamy.
Lamy, I guess. Lamy, I don't know. A tomato moment. At least it's not Scotland.
Oh, no. Not again.
But okay, sorry. Excuse me for my ignorance in many languages and geography. But yeah, so there's a lot of works. There's a lot of, I wouldn't say occult, but let's just call them, they're not prophecies either, but I don't, for the lack of a better word, it's close to prophecies in the works of Jules Verne. So, for example, like, you know he wrote about, what was the name of it? Damn it. From the Earth to the Moon? Do you remember that name? Because he wrote a book of a journey from the Earth to the Moon. Let me see. Give me a second here. I'm looking through my notes. Yeah, From the Earth to the Moon in 1865. So, in this book, and I'm jumping ahead here because I don't want to get to this so close, but it's important to note. Have you ever read that book?
Which one?
From the Earth to the Moon by Jules Verne.
No.
So in this book, he foretells not only that the USA will reach the moon first, he also he specifically mentions. I mean, this is crazy, man. He talks about the escape velocity of lunar orbit in the book. He mentions it at 11,000 kilometers per hour. You know how the escape velocity, the real one,
what is
in
it?
the Apollo 11, 10,830 kilometers per hour.
Okay.
I mean, and you don't believe in coincidence, right?
I don't believe in coincidence.
And it gets worse.
I was going to say that is a pretty big, it's a pretty big leap.
Check this out. The place where the ship took off, and in the book, is 28 degrees north and 28 degrees south. Exactly where the Kennedy Space Center is. Okay. Again, you get what I mean when I say prophetic, at least, in some way?
Right, I get that.
So again, he also mentions that it's USA that will reach the moon. He mentions the name the Columbia as the ship. I mean, there's too much stuff, man, that just correlates with what actually happened. But it gets even worse, man. It's not just that book. Like there's another book he wrote called Paris in the 20th Century.
He called Paris.
Paris, yes.
Okay.
So he wrote this in 1863. I mean, dude, the Eiffel Tower wasn't even built. He mentions the Eiffel Tower. He mentions the light that's it's not a lighthouse, but it looks like a lighthouse in the Eiffel Tower. He mentions the internet. He mentions, he mentions subways.
This is Jules Verne we're talking about?
Yeah, dude.
Okay.
He mentions the fax machine. He mentions what you call it, the energy grid. The way we distribute energy. I mean, this is 1863. So, for the lack of a better word, it's almost prophetic. I mean, it's so close to what actually happened, you know? Especially things like that. It's so specific. That one blew my mind. And we'll get to the journey of the center of the earth a little later.
Okay.
But back to why it's so strange. You see what I'm getting to, right?
I don't know.
So think about it. What do secret societies have in common?
They're not secret. I mean, is that not it?
No, they're the holders of secret information.
Okay.
Like primarily the Freemasons, right? Like the origins of Freemasonry can be debated up to wazoo. We could have a podcast about that. But what makes them important is that they had some type of information which made them have leverage and therefore power. So,
okay.
Get what I'm getting? Are you getting what I'm going with this?
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, man. So the part what I'm very interested about is this person being involved with this society. So there's more to it than just that. Jules Verne, he had some very peculiar situations in his life. He was almost how do you say this? His nephew tried to kill him.
His nephew tried to kill him?
He shot him like a bunch of times. I mean, he missed every single time. You know what's funny though? He only did this, and he went crazy. They put him in a nut house, for lack of a better word. He only did this after, and again, this is I'm taking this directly from a book and translating it live because I can't remember how it was specifically spelled out. But he said a secret in his ear, and after this, this nephew just went crazy and tried to kill him. Something that he said drove this man mad.
Could have been you were born a girl.
Oh, don't stop. Just not. Don't do that.
All right, yeah. I'm just throwing that out there.
You're not wrong, but anyways, okay. So back to this Society of the Mist and their far reach. So if there was such a society that hold such leverage amongst the secret societies, wouldn't it be at least logical that they would have information that would fare more or allow him to see into the plannings of the future, as it were? That's where I'm alluding to.
So, I mean, inherently, I guess the answer should be yes, but I don't know. I mean, obviously, yeah. I'm not.
I know. But so back to the Freemasons then. One of the things that the Freemasons said, there's a lot of interesting work on the Freemasons, but there were particular books that talk about what the end goal was. And again, the mentioning of having how do you call it, a new world order is pretty much a common narrative across almost all of these different secret societies.
That is true.
But they mention the fact of United States being the new Atlantis.
In what way?
So there's a book called The New Atlantis. It alludes to everybody basically starting a society in this new land that would lay the path for the New World Order to take hold. That's another conversation for another podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. As I sit here and furrow my brow, like, wait, what?
There's a lot to unravel, man.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot.
Well, you've still got plenty of time, so let me hear more of it.
All right, so back to the society and to Vern. So there was a couple of different moments in Vern's life that just stuck out. I mentioned one of them, right? We talked about how his nephew tried to kill him. There's also the right before he died. Well, not so. That's another thing. His death is. There's a lot to talk about in regards to his death. Some people believe that he didn't really die; that he faked his own death because he was angry at the things that were going on in the secret society and wanted to get away.
Okay.
But there was a lot of stuff that he kind of, I guess you could say, was trying to hide in symbology and is in not tombstone. And what do you call when? I'm trying to find the word. When a person plans out his, it is a kind of a tombstone. Like if Maria, if you could pull up Jules Verne's resting place real quick, because it's easier if I show you. Maybe you'll get the word because I really can't think of it. But it's very interesting. I mean, he specifically wrote things that he wanted to be there. There's a lot of occultism and symbols and chemical symbols in there, and he wanted a specific phrase to be written: immortality and eternal youth. But that was the one thing that they didn't write.
Immortality and eternal youth.
Yeah, youth.
You said youth.
Youth, yeah.
You're so Hispanic.
I am Hispanic. So here it is. He wanted that to be written there. So there's a lot of symbology in that.
Man, that is...
And that's Vern. That's supposed to be him reaching out from the grave.
Well, folks, if you're listening on a podcast and without the benefit of any video, then when you get a chance, you should absolutely pull up an image of Jules Verne's
grave. That's the word, grave, right?
You couldn't think of grave?
I couldn't think of grave.
So yeah, grave. It's wow. That's all I can really say about it. If you're listening to us on YouTube, we'll have Maria go ahead and put up a picture of it so you can see it. That's pretty stellar.
Yeah.
And I can't make out the writing on it from here.
It didn't have what he wanted to be written. So what was put on there was not by his desire. Everything else was exactly by his design. But the one thing that they laid out was the fact that he wanted to be written immortality and eternal youth because he was obsessed with it. And again, it's a common narrative amongst all of these secret societies is the search or the protection of such information.
Okay.
And this, man, there's so much to this, dude. So there was something also that took me aback when I read it. Again, this is in Spanish. La niebla está por encima del ojo del destino, which translates to the mist is found above the eye of destiny. And the eye of destiny, if you know what it is,
I have no idea.
It's the Illuminati.
So the mist are above the Illuminati. So you're saying that's him claiming that
Not him.
Group.
Not him. This was a common, one of those secret codes that they would talk to each other. So,
Okay.
La niebla está por encima del ojo del destino, or in English, the mist is found above the eye of destiny. Get it? So the eye of destiny,
I understand.
right?
Yeah.
So whenever you look at the symbols of the Illuminati, you almost always see the all-seeing eye. But in this case, the mist is found above that eye. It's creepy. It's creepy stuff, man. But I mean, there's a lot. I mean, when I started looking into this, the first thing that popped out as being particularly interesting was the fact that you could almost find nothing about this, man. It's extremely hard to find information about this. And to me, that's pretty impressive, man. Like, we're talking about things that happened, like 400, 300 years ago. It's insane, man.
I don't know what to say. I mean, I did do some searching while you were talking to see if, and I know Maria did some as well, to see if I could find anything. I don't see anything about this.
I know. And again, please, if for the listeners and everybody out there, if you want to fact check this, please just make sure you utilize Google Translate. And again, you can just look for this in Spanish, and you will find a lot of information about this. You just have to look for it as Sociedad de la Niebla, or Society of the Mist. And you will find a ton of information, particularly because this society includes a lot of influential people, including a lot of influential writers like Alexandre Dumas or Alejandro Dumas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he literally was the one who indoctrinated him.
I don't know what to say.
I know, because you can't find information. That's the part that's crazy, right?
I mean, I don't have words. I'm sorry.
Right,
You'll have to keep going.
So let's go get back to the book, right? This book supposedly was a romance novel, right?
So Maria, our producer, has just handed me. I don't speak Spanish, so it says.
Let me try it. Sociedad? No, you close. La Sociedad de la Niebla, José Ramón Caraballo López. It's 17 euros, and we can buy it if you want to. But no, I don't want to buy this.
But don't you want to know?
Yeah, but there's other books that are better.
How do you know? You haven't read this one.
I mean, you're right. I'm just being a dick.
Okay. Is it because his name is Jose?
Maybe.
Okay. Well, now our listeners know. If you guys have read this book, or if you know anything about this, go ahead and make comments if you're on YouTube. I'm curious as to what you know that we don't know.
Right. I mean, there's very little of information in English about this stuff, which is, again, it sparked my curiosity. Because for the most part, when you talk about all these different secret societies, you find information in every language. You know, because they're infamous. They're everywhere.
Sure.
Especially when it comes to Freemasons, Illuminati, and again, one that I haven't mentioned, the Rosicrucians.
Rosicrucians, yep. I did see that is one of the main subjects in the writings of Jules Verne.
Exactly. Because, I mean, again, so back to that thing we were talking about in our last subject, or last podcast, is how if you wanted to or at least transfer some of this knowledge to a very large number of people, or find people that let's call them illuminated people, or people that are in the same wavelength as some of these folks. The only way you could really do that at scale and efficiently would be through works of fiction, would be through books. I mean, realistically, that would be the only way. Because what does writing fiction books give you? It gives you reach. Because that's something that at that time, particularly, was a main form of entertainment. So if you wanted to reach people, that's the best way to do it. So, again, let's go back to some of his works. So, you have heard of the Round the World in 80 Days?
Yes.
So, you remember the name of one of the main characters? Phileas Fogg. Phileas, yeah. Isn't it interesting?
I mean, yes.
So, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I know this is superficial, but it's interesting.
No, I mean, it is, while it is superficial, given the nature of the conversation, yeah, I mean, it is a little weird. Yeah,
so let's look at some of his other works. So we mentioned From the Earth to the Moon. We mentioned Paris in the 20th Century. And again, we just touched on the Hollow Earth in our last podcast, and Journey to the Center of the Earth. A lot of the stuff that he mentions in that book, again, we alluded to a lot of that, so if the listeners want to, they can go ahead and check out our other podcast about it. But most of the stuff we were talking about comes from extreme theosophic or occult knowledge, and he wrote a lot of that into that book. And I don't want to be redundant, so again, we could listen to the other podcast. We were going into depth with a lot of the legends and myths about the Hollow Earth. But what boils down to is we have here something that is almost never mentioned in modern popular culture in regards to secret society, conspiracy theory, all that, interesting stuff.
Right.
And I thought, in my mind, this is, how do you say, not a rough jewel. There's a saying for it, right? When you find
a diamond in the rough.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought I had. I mean, and to this point, I have not found something to disprove it. Pretty much all the things that I found were either half-spoken or breadcrumbs here and there, but almost all of them point to the same thing. The influences that this society had were far-reaching and probably still are, which is extremely peculiar, man, because if you look at it, especially when we go back to the things that we were talking about, specifically in regards to the works of fiction, a lot of the most influential people, we're talking about what was Candido? Was Voltaire.
Yeah,
so
Voltaire.
So almost all of these great writers, like John Dee, like all of them.
Who's John Dee?
Oh man, oh my God, that's a subject for a very long podcast.
Okay.
Let's just call him 007.
Okay.
But anyway, so he was a consultant to the Queen. Originally stated to be, MI5, MI6.
Sure.
He was the original spy, but not only that, he was an occultist. He was the one who wrote the Enochian language, the angels' language. He was very deep into alchemy and the occult ways, and is a very interesting person. And he was a member of this thing too. So you see where I'm getting to this. I mean, you have a lot of influential people that were in positions of power or close to it, or at least you could say the puppet wielders, if it were.
Right, I got you.
I mean, talk about what's this guy? Not Edison. The guy with the glasses and the long hair who did the thing with the kite and the key.
Is that not Edison? No, that's Franklin.
Exactly. Yeah. He was a part of this guy. Well, he was technically a part of the Hellfire Club, which was the origin or origin. Well, not the origin. It's supposedly close to the origin and place of the Illuminati. He was a part of it. I mean, you get what I'm saying here, right?
I mean, if you believe that, yeah.
I mean, I'm not okay. So let's go farther back. Here's where it gets really interesting. That book that I mentioned. So there's a lot of different languages in that book. You have Latin, you have French.
Which book? You mentioned a few of them.
All right, I'm sorry. Let's go back to it. So the book that's the core principle or the dogmatic work, or as it were, their Bible, right?
Okay.
For this secret society, which is called The Dreams of Polyphilus. El Sueño de Polifilia. If you guys want to find more information on it, please search in Spanish. So that book, again, supposedly was written in 1499, but nobody really knows. Like they even said that it was supposedly written by one of the Medici family. Nobody knows really who wrote it. They know who printed it in that date.
Right.
But the book itself, supposedly, is much, much, much older.
So is that book... I know that book is available. I saw that you can get it on like PDF and EPUB and everything. Mm-hmm. So I'd be interested to... I'll probably grab a copy of that after this and read through it and see if I can make heads or tails of it. I will say that books of that age typically don't really have context for us.
Yeah.
Or at least for the majority of us. Mm-hmm. I read through Dante's book, and I couldn't.
Oh man,
it was so steeped in.
Guess who was a member? Funny you should mention him. See, this is what I mean, and again, you had a very important note there. This comes from Venice and Florence and all these. I mean. You get what there's a common theme to this, right? And the theme is this is coming from a work of fiction, supposedly, right? But if you start reading it, just like the work of Dante, just like the work of Dumas, just like the work of Verne, it seems like a story, common narrative, which has archetypes of good and bad, a philosophical journey, as it were, where people, when they go into it, specifically Verne, he's very well known for this. If you read any of his books, when people go into this journey, they come out of a different person, a better person. Almost all of his books are the same way.
Okay.
The main character or characters always escape the story coming out as a different person, which is a common narrative amongst all of the secret societies. You come in one way, you go out another, with new knowledge, with new insight of life.
But, I mean, isn't that typical of almost every story?
Again, that we can talk about Joseph Campbell and all that stuff, but
No,
yes.
it doesn't have to be specific in
but
writers.
You're right. The hero's journey, as it were. Yes. But I'm talking specifically to the way that he alludes to this. In particular to the book, the Polyphilus book. Here's what's interesting about it. There's a thought that I found, and this is a very old book. It was written in the 60s, that mentioned that they believe that this book was written much before, and the alludations to different languages was something that was incorporated after. And they base it to the origins of, and this is where it gets really weird. The origins of,
because it's not weird now.
Weird now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So the origins of Freemasonry. So that is, oh man. I mean, I want to just touch on that because there's one book that I have that just goes into very much depth on this, called Solomon's Key, which talks about the true origins of Freemasonry. But there's three different subjects or thoughts on this. One is that it's these stonemasons in the 1700s created a society to basically keep their knowledge of stonemasonry.
Right.
And that's where the Freemasons originated from.
I think most people know that now.
So that's what most people believe. That's wrong. That's not the origin. So the other one is that they come from the Knights Templar. From the time of the Knight, because if you think about the Knights Templar back in the day of the Crusades, they spent 12 years digging on the Holy Mount because they had, again, a story that told them about ancient knowledge that was hidden in a specific area of the Holy Land. They spent 12 years digging. Guess what? After they found it, they became one of the most influential and powerful group in that time. So much as to challenge the church's power, which at that time was almost all powerful. So again, there's a lot to unravel on it, but the last one, which is the most important one of origins of Freemasonry, goes back to the Egyptian times, pre-Old Kingdom. We're talking about when the land was called Kemet, or because that was the original name of Egypt. It wasn't Egypt; it was Kemet, the land of Kemet.
Right, I remember that.
So that's where it gets really interesting, man.
So this is like an onion.
I mean, it is. It's just it's so much, man. There's too much to talk about. But in their book, they talk about, and again, the reason why I'm tying this in is because there's a belief in this old book from the 60s that talks about this tale being how do you say so I don't know if I should say this, but it's important, so I'll say it. In Freemasonry, when you get to a specific
we're about to get secrets, people.
No, so when you get to a specific let's call them level, you're gonna get a book. And the book, you can literally buy this book if you know how to ask for it in Barnes & Noble. I'm not kidding. This book is written in code. So there's no way you can actually read the book unless you understand the code. But it holds a lot of information. And then when you get to another level, they tell you, okay, you forget everything you heard, and then reinterpret that same book that we gave you this other way with new knowledge. The reason why that's important is because you see the common theme here, right? You have these works of fiction, and it's specifically that one, that they spent almost all their time trying to decipher because they believed that it was written in a specific code containing the information that alluded to a truth that could give them the power that they needed to basically do the New World Order.
I think I just had a brain hemorrhage. I'm at this point where it's like, I'm still...
right?
You have broken me. So, one of the thoughts that I had is, if this book is available at Barnes & Noble, and I understand this wasn't your point.
Yeah.
But if this is available at Barnes & Noble, why wouldn't somebody go get it and try to decipher it?
You can. You just won't be able to.
Why wouldn't you just... I mean, people are hella smart.
It's not because of... So it's like the Caesar cipher, right? You can't decipher a Caesar cipher unless you have a key. Same thing.
What is a Caesar cipher?
It's a way of coding. Anyways, but the point is a way of encrypting something. Right? It's the only way you can decrypt it is with the key, right? Same principle. You could spend your entire life trying to figure it out, but if you don't have the key, I mean, maybe if you have a quantum computer, you could do it, but I don't think you can do it.
Well, this was a code that was created before computers were a thing, right?
Well, I mean, no, not really. So, the one I don't really know the whole thing, right? I'm not a Freemason. I learned this throughout scouring.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, so the reason I know this is because I have a family member who is, and he died, and I found a lot of stuff. But no,
now you're a dead man.
No. If
it's not some Irishman that blows you up, it's going to be a Freemason.
There's a lot of this stuff that you're already going to find. There's a lot of books that allude to it and talk about it. You can find a lot of this you could already find on the internet. But the part you can't find is this one thing that I was alluding to, the real origin of it, which I believe is to be true. In this book, The Solomon's Key, they talk about it being before the land of Kemet, before the land of David, before the Solomon's Temple. So back to one of the things that happen in Freemasonry is that there's a play when you get to the third degree. So there's two different venues when you're a Freemason. There's the Scottish Rite and the York Rite. So depending on what flavor you're on, there's either 33rd degrees or there's 3. So the third degree, this whole third degree comes from a play they enact. And this play talks about 3...
When you say a play, they enact?
They enact, yes. So if you're a Freemason, when you're going to get to the third degree, you're basically going to be taking part in a play that reenacts...
That just seems weird, man.
It is weird, but the point of this is it's just literally a play where people dress up as these subjects. One of them is Hiram Abiff, which Hiram Abiff
is one of your favorite historical figures.
Exactly.
Yep.
So Hiram Abiff... Hiram.
Tell the listeners who Hiram is.
So Hiram Abiff was supposedly 2 people. One, he was the architect that constructed King Solomon's Temple, and he was also a king back then. But the important figure here is the architect. He was the architect, the great architect, right? Which is supposedly what the G stands for. Anyways, talking about another subject. In Freemasonry, whenever you see Freemasonic symbols, you see a G, right?
Yes.
And yes. G, a lot of people mistake it for God, but in reality, it's the great architect. So the first great architect, the person who laid this great temple was Hiram.
Okay.
So the third degree, when you're gonna be in this play, you see people. One person's dressed as Hiram Abiff.
Okay.
And then you have a bunch of other characters around there. So Hiram Abiff was a Freemason, and in that time, and specifically in that origins, and again, a lot of this is coming from Christopher Knight's book, The Hiram Key, where he is himself a Freemason. And again, he got into a lot of flack about this because he talks a lot of the stuff that I'm telling you right now. Mm-hmm. He talks about this verbosely in this book. So it's Robert Lomas and Christopher Knight, 2 authors, The Hiram Key, both Freemasons. And the whole point was a thesis that took them more than 10 years to try and find the true origins of Freemasonry, which they believe is what I'm saying here. So in this time, in this place, when you were a Freemason, depending on what level you were, you got paid more or less. And you also knew secrets. So Jubilee, Jubilo, and I forget this third guy's name, but it sounds similar. How do you say, when you get... when somebody tries to not rob you, but when you're ambushed, they ambush Hiram Abiff.
Okay.
And they tell him, "Tell me the secrets of Freemasonry. Tell me the secrets that you know. I want to get to your level. I want to get your knowledge and obviously your wealth and blah blah blah." He says no. So Jubilee hits him in the head. So that's what's enacted in this play. And then the other guy says the same thing. "Tell me your secrets." And again, Hiram says no. He hits him in the head. And then the third blow kills him. And they hide, and again, here's another interesting part. Jubilee, Jubilo, and the other guy were supposedly Abraham's sons. So there's a lot here, man, to unravel.
So, obviously I don't expect you to know all of the answers, but in this play...
Yes.
I'm assuming that once if you're participating, mm-hmm. then you have to play Hiram, where you're basically...
dying for the knowledge, because you cannot...
That is so weird.
I know, man. I know. It's strange. It's weird.
That sounds like a Hispanic thing. No, I'm totally kidding.
But here's where it gets very interesting.
You've said that like 20 times so far. I'm so confused right now about everything. So this is where it gets really interesting, guys. This is where I'm going to start pulling out my phone and going, where have I gone wrong in my life? But go ahead, tell me.
It's a slew of rabbit holes, man.
It seems that way.
But here, okay, so back to Hiram. So he dies.
Yes.
So back then...
He was clubbed to death.
Right. So he is believed, and again, this is very, very particular in this book. In the book, throughout their research, they have supposedly found Hiram, a mummy. The mummy's name is Sequenir Tao II. Sequenir Tao
Sequenir
II.
Tao II. Okay.
So that's believed in there, and this is again, Robert Lamas and Christopher Knight believe that is Hiram Abiff. That is the person that was murdered. What's interesting though is back then there were no pharaohs, there were kings, and in this time there was a specific ritual, and again there's a ritualistic nature to all of these societies,
of course,
that translates back to the Society of the Mist and all that stuff. But so this ritual was extremely important. You know that and this is common knowledge, the Egyptians were masters of death, right? They studied death for centuries. They wanted to understand the secrets and mysteries of death. But one of the things that not a lot of people talk about is that they believe not only that there was a life after death, but they believed that the true life started after death. But the only way you could attain it was through this ritual. So here's where it gets really strange. Stranger.
Yeah. Okay.
So the idea of this ritual was for the king to become from king here on earth to king in heaven. That ritual was lost when they murdered Hiram Abiff. That was one of the secrets that he was not relaying. He was supposedly, because this was something that was passed by king, and here's where it gets a little muddy. Remember when I said there's either the architect and the king? King Hiram and architect Hiram? So that's where there's a lot of muddy waters. I think that, not just me, the folks that I talked about, these two Freemasons, they believe that they're one and the same. That King Hiram and Hiram the architect are the same person. And again, if you want to read more about this, there's the book, the Solomon's Key, and there's also another book that's basically a bibliography about where they got all this information from. So if our listeners want to take a look at this in a more deep, in-depth manner, they can, and they will find exactly what I'm talking about right now.
And what are these books called?
So the first is the Hiram Key. That's the one that talks about the origins of Freemasonry, and the second one, I have to get back to you on that. I'm sorry. If you can just Google that real quick, because I can't remember off the top of my head. I read it a long time ago. I have it at home, but I just can't picture the name. Just look for Christopher Knight and Robert Lamas, and just look for the bibliography in Wikipedia, and you'll see it. It has.
While Maria looks that up, you can keep going.
All right. So back to the idea of the ritual. So this man was believed to be a king. He was, and here's the important bit. This ritual was only known and taught, just like a lot of these rituals are taught in Freemasonry, from one person to the other. But because this was such a secret ritual, it was only taught from king to prince, so from father to son. His son never knew the ritual. His dad died. The Hiram Code? No. The Book of Hiram. The Book of Hiram. So the Book of Hiram is the one that contains a lot of the information.
So the Hiram Key and the Book
of Hiram. Exactly. Okay. So the Book of Hiram has more of the in-depth view about all the things that are talked about in the Hiram Key. Thank you, Maria. So back to the idea of the king dying without...
So the king died and the son didn't know the ritual.
So guess what happens?
He didn't get to heaven.
He made it up.
The son made it up?
The son makes up the ritual. So the ritual that the Freemasons and pretty much almost all of the secret societies hold to be truth is fake. But, and here's where this is the part that blows me away. He was not the only one.
He who?
Hiram.
He was not the only one clubbed to death?
He was not the only one that had the actual ritual.
The knowledge. Okay.
There was another person on another side of the world.
Makes sense.
So that's what one of the biggest things that history kind of like over encompasses with a blanket of falsehood. Something that was looked for, like some people call the tree of life or the fountain of youth or whatever you want to call it.
Mm.
If you think about it, it was scoured across the planet for thousands of years. Like all the cultures looked for this bit of truth.
Yeah.
That's the bit of truth that was lost. But supposedly...
So a method on a ceremony you could do that will allow you to ascend to a second life.
Something like that, yeah.
That's bizarre.
I know, right? It's fucking mind job.
So let me ask you this. Again, devil's advocate.
Yeah.
So, you ready for this one?
Yeah, man, hit me.
All right. You are not a Freemason.
I am not.
Yeah. By law, you have to... No, that's not clearly not true.
I'm not. My grandfather was. My grandfather was a Freemason, man. I found a lot of this, like that weird little book I told you about. I found it.
So, if you're not a Freemason and you know this bit of knowledge, what makes you think that they don't know?
They know a lot of this. Shit, these two guys are Freemasons. Robert Lomas and Christopher Knight, both of them are Freemasons. The thing is, nobody's found, or at least supposedly, that other king, that other person that holds a secret. But there's many, many books across the eons of history that allude to Philosopher's Stone, Fountain of Youth, Tree of Life.
So out of curiosity, what do they believe happens then if you don't have this ceremony?
They just faked it.
No, I mean, they did, but
yeah.
What do they think happens to your spirit or your soul?
So that was the only way you could attain immortality, I guess. In the other world, or as it were, the kingdom of heaven. That's what they call it.
That's weird.
So then, so the ritual would never be complete, which would mean that the son would never truly be a king. Because then the only way for the son to become a king is for this ritual to be complete. He would attain the knowledge that he needs to rule the earth, whereas his father would attain the knowledge and way of ritualistically coming into the king of the heavens, as it were. I mean, it's shit. It's crazy stuff.
It is crazy. It is crazy. Like I said, there's a lot to unwrap here.
And we jumped ship, man. We went from the myth, the Society of the Mist, to the Freemasons, to freaking back to the Sequanier Tau II, which was like people are gonna be like, "What the hell is he talking about?"
I'm already kind of there, so it's like.
The thing is, a lot of this is tied together, man.
I mean, I see a lot of, I don't even say circumstantial, but like if you look online, you're not going to see shit about the mist, you know. And
that's the part that truly made me extremely curious, because you could find pages and books and all day of the Illuminati, the Freemasons, Priority of Sion, Rosicrucianism, the New Dawn. I mean, all these societies were extremely prevalent, and specifically in the time where this was happening, with Jules Verne and Dumas and all those guys.
I get that.
But the part that unifies it all for me is when you start looking at what he wrote. I mean, you saw that, man. The precision of him stating the escape velocity of lunar orbit.
I mean, I didn't see that.
I mean,
I'm taking for granted that you got it right.
No. Please, listeners, just fact check the hell out of me if you want. You can read this. It was written by him. 100 years before the lunar landing took place. I mean, that's insane, Charles. So you get what I mean, right? I mean, you have these ancient knowledges and these ancient rituals and all this crap that we're talking about. But what really interested me was the things that he was putting down in books.
So I'm curious. I guess for the. And I'm just picking an item because my brain's like, yeah, this is like a smorgasbord.
I know.
This is a buffet of weird shit.
Yes, it is.
So
it is.
I'm just gonna latch on to the first one. So the exit speed, the 11,000, right?
The lunar orbit. Yeah.
Lunar orbit. What is? At any point does he indicate where the source of this knowledge is?
Well, no. It's just a story, right? He just talks about this as being like part of the narrative of the story. Like, he just gives you information like any science fiction writer would, right? They give you...
You're talking about Jules Verne, right? But yes. I'm talking about your Cinco de Mayo guy. I know that's not his name, but...
Sequanier Tau?
Yeah, that guy.
Oh, no, that's different, dude. No. Sequanier Tau... No, so that's just the name of the mummy that these Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas believe to be actual hieroglyphs.
All right, so let's back up. The guy who wrote the book that I can't pronounce, what is his name? Francesco...
Which
something?
One?
The very first one. Where it talks about the one that it supposedly is like code.
Oh, okay. So nobody knows who actually wrote it,
right?
The Dreams of Polyphilus.
Okay, so
Francisco
that book,
Colonna is supposedly attributed, like he's the supposed author, but that's not true.
All right, so I apologize.
Oh, right. No. I see what you're doing.
Okay.
You're trying to tie this in out. So, yes, I forgot to tie it in. That's a very big loop.
All right, good. Then that's what I'm waiting for. Let's hear that part.
6,000-year-old loop that I'm trying to tie in.
Yeah.
So this is where it's literally breadcrumbs.
Don't say this.
It's breadcrumbs. I'm sorry, but I only found this out in one work of nonfiction, but still, again, take this with a grain of salt because, again, there's very little written about this subject. And I don't want to... This is more of me tying knots together. because of having the knowledge of both sides on this. In that book that they're mentioning this.
Which book?
Goddamn.
You've mentioned several books in there.
I do not have that written down. I have to come back to you. We can add it in the.
What's it about?
It talks about the secrets of Jules Verne.
Okay.
I think it's not the one that we were alluding to earlier. It's a different book written by a guy. I think it's a Spanish dude.
So a book we haven't heard of talk about tonight.
Yes, because I forgot to write it down.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right.
It's a lot of books, man.
It is a lot of books.
But anyway, so this guy, so he talks about an idea that he believes that this specific work is much older.
Okay.
And that's it, right? That's all he alludes to. Me tying this into to Sequanier Tau and all this stuff. So the reason I mentioned that this makes sense is because if you look at all these different codices and different books that are written in code throughout the ages, there's a common narrative, right? A lot of them have never been able to be decoded, right? Like you mentioned this once to me. You told me about could you remind me the name of that one? Has these weird language and alludes to like weird
like the plants and things.
Yeah. What's that one?
I don't remember.
But you know what I'm.
But I know it's not.
Codex. I don't remember. I don't remember the name.
I want to say Vedic scripts. So that's obviously not it.
No. But
it's something like that. Actually, I believe that they recently, and that's getting slightly off topic, but I believe that they recently identified some of that.
No.
No. Oh, you're talking about the producer.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that you know what? Let's just save that for another day.
That's a very interesting topic.
That is a very interesting topic.
You told me
and it's something I can potentially participate in.
Yeah, sorry.
This one is just
this is occult shit, man.
There you go. There's the line that describes this whole episode. This is occult shit, man. That's exactly what this is.
Voynich. The Voynich.
Okay, see, I was close. That's why I was like Vedic.
Yes, it's a V. Yes.
Yeah, it's V.
Yeah. So, but the point is.
So I guess before we get to that, because I'm already severely lost. Right? I think it's a cool concept. I do. I think it's really. I know nothing of Jules Verne. It's not something I've ever studied. I know some of his works. Mm-hmm. I'm intrigued by what you've told me, so I will do some more looking into it.
Yes.
But I'm trying to figure out how did we get to Jules Verne from the first book.
Yes, okay.
So, Syphilis Guy.
Oh, that's awesome. So, Syphilis Guy. So, there's a lot of hidden knowledge in that book, right? If you think
Which one?
about...
The Polysyphus book?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So
they've already, like... I was reading in the Wikipedia article... Mm-hmm. Which, granted, is Wikipedia.
Yeah.
But I was reading that, like, they've debunked almost everything that's in there. Like, they know that the hieroglyphics
it's not real. The hieroglyphics are not real. Exactly.
Right.
So, again, it's a coded book, right? So, absolutely it's not real. Because it's a coded book. I mean...
What is it supposed to be coded to say?
So, that's the thing that I don't know. I mean, I can't answer that. I can just tell you that these folks, this secret society, spent the better part of the collective knowledge trying to decipher it. So what that tells me is there was something very important hidden in that book.
Okay.
So that's the only reason that and this is me personally, so again, take it with a grain of salt. I allude to the fact that maybe what they're trying to find in that book is that true name of the true nature of the person that actually has the knowledge.
I see.
That's
for
what I
the
mean.
Ceremony. Okay.
Exactly.
See, now I understand where you were going, but for like the last 45 minutes, I'm like, Jesus, you've hit a lot of secret societies. We potentially have a lot of enemies now. But
please, if I die, just I don't know, man.
I will. In honor of your falling, I will continue making podcasts.
Yes, please.
But I will say nothing of the Mr. Fog. Or the Mr. Fog, yeah.
Misty Fog.
Yeah, the Society of, I don't know. But no. I guess one of the questions I was asking is, like, where do we think this knowledge came from?
Okay. So, that's a very interesting point. You mean the knowledge in the book?
Well, any of the books. Like, so take Jules Verne, for example.
Mm-hmm.
He knew the 11,000 number, right?
Right.
Or ballpark.
And he also knew
where did he get this knowledge from?
That's a good point, right? I can't answer that. I can't tell you what I think that he was alluding to something that was going to happen in the future because it was being planned.
In what way?
So again, if you think of the other point of this society, It was to unify the world, the known world, under one government.
Under a single government.
New world order.
So, right. And we know that there's a lot of people that are trying to do that now, and there's a lot of resistance to that for some reason.
Exactly.
I personally don't care.
Yeah.
I mean,
it is what it is.
Exactly. I guess my thought process, I kind of expected you to go all George Tsoukalos and be like, aliens. Yeah.
No.
That's what I expected. Cause
No.
I'm curious to... I mean, maybe.
I mean, I'm just in relation... Wait. Yeah, you're not right. I can't say that,
Was Jules Verne an alien?
No.
What about the syphilis guy?
Maybe, man.
Okay, no, and I don't mean to downplay it. Obviously,
I hear you.
But I'm just trying to figure out questions. I'm just getting questions that we will never get answered, obviously.
But still, it's important to ask them.
I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it detracts from the actual conversation. But it seems to me like these are the things I think of first. Mm-hmm. When you say that this book is a code, my first thought is by whose standards? You know,
who coded it?
Like
who has the key?
Well, no. It's like, what makes you think it's a code?
Well, not me. I'm not.
I mean, obviously not you. I mean, but you do kind of.
I mean, I believe that it's a code just because these people spent basically their entire or what the author states as the entire creation of their being trying to decipher it. Apart from having their hand in play of trying to do what you would call how do you say, infiltration and to different governments and different establishments of power to try and crumble them, as they did with the French Revolution and with what happened in the United States and all that, as a part of their main goal of unifying the whole world, blah, blah, blah. So that was one of their goals, but their other goal was to decipher again, this important bit or small book of fiction, which again, it's a work of fiction.
Well, I mean, supposedly. I mean,
yes.
Obviously, but I'm just wondering at what point does somebody pick up a book, and let's say I write a book and I write poorly. I'm not saying the book is done poorly. I haven't read it.
Yeah, okay.
But let's say I write poorly. What's to stop somebody from picking it up and going, this dude knows things. Mm-hmm. He's encoded it in his fiction. Okay,
so we'd have to unravel that because there's a lot to unravel that. So if
in
you
what
think,
way?
So, okay, people that were members of these societies, right? The Rosicrucians in particular, and people that interluded into the same society. People like Isaac Newton. People that believe that there were things to be unraveled in the known canon of history and information, like, for example, the searching for the Sorcerer's Stone, which a lot of people, if you start, and we should go into that rabbit hole, believe that it was not a stone, it was knowledge. That what they were trying to unravel was a bit of knowledge that was lost in time.
Okay.
So again, this whole common narrative, common theme, is that there's something that was lost. And that which was lost was not completely lost. And there's bits and pieces of information where all these different groups of highly intelligent, more so than I could ever even dream of being. Because I mean, Leonardo da Vinci was part of one of these secret societies as well. So again, there's a lot of influential people that were embedded into these secret societies, trying to find that one common goal of understanding what was lost and trying to unravel it. And again, and we can go back to the Knights Templar in another podcast and talk about the 12 years they spent looking for the same information on the Temple Mound.
Sure.
But
I find this very interesting, and I think I'm going to try to summarize your theory, is that there is one person somewhere in history who is not Hiram, who has the knowledge of how to ascend immortally to heaven, or to be immortal in heaven.
Or the ritual, I guess.
Or let's call it the ritual. And that more than likely he or she taught it to their relative, their offspring, and that has continued down through time, and that somewhere in the world this is still known, probably by maybe a handful of people.
Exactly.
And that this Society of the Mist, Society of the Fog, are trying to figure out who that person is.
Exactly.
All right.
If anything, it's a great idea for a movie.
I mean, maybe if I got it right.
No, you got it 100% right.
Okay, so I mean, it's interesting. I will say it's interesting, and there's never enough time, it seems like, for our discussions. But this is one of those that will probably, after I've had some time to look into
Two-parter.
Two-part, at least.
But I mean, think about it, right? There's a duality in all of this. So if you think about exactly what you said, that means there's two avenues. There's the avenue that continued with the truth, and then there's the people that's been seeking it. So think about it. What does that say about the people that have it? They don't want these folks to have it.
I understand.
So there's a lot to unravel.
Obviously, it was part of these folks that caused the death of Hiram, so why would you want them to have it?
Well, jealousy and human nature, as it were, and all that stuff.
Exactly.
But still.
Hey, guys, I could use the knowledge. So if y'all are listening...
And then I'm dead.
Yeah. So I think we're coming up on the end of our time available for tonight. I want to thank everybody for listening. Once again, this is Bo.
Oh, this is Joe.
And appreciate everybody here. We'll see you next time. Don't kill him.